Joining us now is Doug DeMuro. He is a car YouTuber, a very popular host of his channel over there, which we'll have a link on the description. Doug, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we have an audience very interested in used cars. We've been tracking it in terms of the economy. It's a key benchmark, really, of the ability for middle class life and others to have accessibility. Let's put this up there on the screen. We've seen interesting price movement in the used car market. Used EV prices actually collapsing, Tesla being the reason why. We know this is a space that you are particularly very interested in. What's your sense of the used car market and how it's interacting with EVs right now?
Well, I think the used car market in general finally seems to be slowing down a little bit after a long, long time, as everyone has seen, of crazy prices and enormously high demand and low supply, frankly. But electric vehicles specifically do seem to be falling more than others. I think there's a lot of different reasons for this. One big factor is Tesla, who's, of course, like the biggest electric vehicle provider still. The biggest manufacturer, they've had some price cuts as supply has more caught up with demand. They've kind of lowered their prices of their new vehicles, which has in turn driven down, pricing for used vehicles as people could just go buy new ones. But I think there's more factors at play also. Gas prices are not what they were, 6 months or a year ago. They've come down a
Mm.
little bit. That helps some relief. That, provides a little relief. And I think, supply and demand are finally catching up a little bit. Of course, there's interest rates, a lot of different factors.
Yeah,
Mhm.
can you take us through a little bit of the story of the broader used car market? Because this ended up being a really key driver of inflation. It was something that we have been tracking here really closely because these prices, both of new and used cars, but used in particular, were really out of control. Was it just supply chain issues, or what was the story of what was going on there?
If I were to sum it up in what sort of the biggest component of it, I would say that supply chain issues was certainly the largest factor. When COVID happened, a lot of automakers shut down production facilities, thinking that no one was going to buy their cars, and then production facilities were kind of forced to shut down because they weren't able to produce during COVID because of people being close together, et cetera. And that really put automakers behind when then interest rates went way down and demand went way up. And so when demand is really high for new cars and the new cars don't exist, of course, people then turn to used cars to go and buy them. And that drove used car prices absolutely through the roof. And so that
Hmm.
was a big factor. But then you have the other factor of you've had basically 2 years of very limited new car production. And so we're seeing in terms of, lease returns coming back and trade-ins, there was just like almost a hole for the 2020 to 2022 model years where there weren't as many cars made. And that's going to have a ripple effect on used car prices for a while, even though we're starting to see it kind of taper off.
Right. Doug, some of my favorite videos that have done is about assessing the worth of an actual car. Some of these are supercars, which are definitely fun to aspirationally watch. I'm sure that's why they're so popular. But what goes into assessing the worth of a car, of a normal car that you or a normal person might drive? Somebody is like, I need something to get to work, back and forth. How do they have to think about it in this changing market right now?
I guess it's kind of based largely on how much do you need or want a vehicle at the moment, right?
Hmm.
When cars are really cheap and supply is huge and you can get a great deal, some people think nothing of, hey, I've had my car for a year, so I'm going to go trade into a different car, whatever. It's 10 grand off, it doesn't matter. But in today's world, it's more like, oh my God, cars are so expensive and interest rates are so high. I don't want to trade up my car unless I've been in an accident and desperately need a new vehicle, or my family has grown and I need a van or an SUV. And so, in terms of assessing like what a car is worth, it almost becomes a question of what it is worth to someone.
Mm.
And it becomes a question of what, their personal circumstances. Is it really worth paying $5,000 over the sticker price for a Honda Odyssey? People made those decisions a couple of years ago out of necessity.
Yeah.
That
And
makes sense.
what are some of the factors that are contributing to prices now coming back to earth and being more in line with whatever normalcy is?
I think that there's a lot of different factors now. I think supply is finally catching up with demand. Automakers are kind of back producing again, and not all, but a lot of car companies have been able to bring things back to a relatively more normal inventory level. So new cars are more available. But I think actually a huge component of it, just like in housing, is interest rates. It was one thing when you could go and finance a car at 0% or at 1%. A lot of people, again, thought not much of doing that. When things are 7, 8%, when automakers are offering deals at 5%, then it becomes a little bit less, it becomes a little bit harder to go and justify that to yourself. And I think that's having some downward pressure on the car market as well.
Yeah, and one thing we've tracked is all sorts of personal debt measures are up. Credit card debt is massive at this point. Are you seeing the same thing in terms of car financing?
I've generally heard that that's been true, that car financing and car debt has been sort of at higher levels. I mean, sticker prices of cars have continued to go up, and as we saw over the last couple of years, there wasn't an enormous amount of deals to be had in the car world, so people were financing larger and larger percentages of cars in terms of like their values, and so I think that certainly has happened as well.
My last question really focuses on electric vehicles. We've seen an explosion in the market. Even anecdotally, I see Rivians on the road now. I see some BMW electric cars. I've seen the Kia, the Hyundai, the Tesla, obviously. As we see increasing penetration along with what we're seeing in terms of subsidies and all that, what's your general sense of where the EV market will go? Do you think that we'll see the price continue to come down, become even more accessible to the middle class and the lower middle class? Like, how far away are we away from it becoming a standard vehicle that a normal person will consider, even as their first car with limited finances?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that's one of the big questions right now in the car industry in general, because as you're kind of implying, between BMW and Rivian and
Hmm.
Tesla, most of the electric cars that have been on the market so far have been higher end vehicles. And so, yeah, will they become more mainstream? Sure. When will that happen? I think that's like the big question. It's certainly coming down more and more between the Model 3s and, yeah, the Kia EV6, the Hyundai Ioniq 5, cars in the $40,000 to $50,000 price point. But it's still not ubiquitous. And I think the charging infrastructure is a component of that. When are people going to be able to get chargers to street parking, to apartments, that kind of thing? That's a factor. But I think it'll be still some years away before you see just full widespread adoption of electric vehicles. I don't think we're quite there yet.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that the charging
it's
infrastructure to me
huge.
is the biggest piece. I have an electric vehicle, so does Saagar, but I
Mhm.
would not want to only have an electric
Right.
vehicle because for long road trips and things, I just, I would be nervous about being able to make all of that work. Doug, so great to have you.
Yeah,
Thank you so
thank
much
you.
for your insights.
Yeah,
We really enjoyed
absolutely.
talking to you.
Yeah, we'd love to have you back, Doug. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, we'll see you later. We got a fun candidate interview coming up, which we'll post later today for our premium subscribers. I think you're going to want to take a look at that. So check your inbox. We'll see you guys later.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.